I truly put the Chiefs on a pedestal.
I think their defense is better than their offense this year.
That's a hot take. That wasn't a hot take.
That's the clickbait right there.
That's a good hot take.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. This is called the Second and Short Podcast. I'm Josiah.
I'm Christian.
I'm Hayden.
I'm Eli.
I'm Luke. I'm like the tech guy.
And like I said, this is the Second and Short Podcast. We decided to name it Second and Short because in the NFL, on Second and Short, the entire playbook is open. And so really you can do just about anything. And that's kind of what the idea behind our podcast is we're going to talk about anything and everything that comes to NFL football and a little bit of college as well.
Yeah, so just some background about us. Josie's actually my boss from my high school job. Christian's my brother. I'm me, and then this is my cousin Eli. Luke also works with all of us, so we just love football. So today we're going to be going over the AFC outlook. We're going to go by one, each of the 16 AFC teams, and we're just going to discuss each team. So we're actually going to start off with Eli talking about the Patriots.
Yeah, so to start off the AFC East with the Patriots, so first, just a little snapshot of their schedule. I'm not going to go through every team they're playing, but for the AFC East, they are playing the AFC West this year, which is going to be a really strong division. So in my opinion, that could be tough for the AFC East, and they're also playing the NFC East, which in my opinion is a bit top-heavy. However, to get into it for the Patriots, some players, notable players that they added this offseason include Jabril Peppers, James Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Gesicki, who will probably be the backup tight end. In the draft, they didn't do a ton. They did get Kayshon Boutte later on, and then also Christian Gonzalez was their first-round pick at cornerback. They also picked up edge rusher Keon White, and then also just a couple days ago, Ezekiel Elliott to help out their run game. So you might be asking, why do they need help in the run game? So one thing is their offense did struggle. They were 25th in the yards per game, only 106 rushing yards per game, and 17th in points per game at about 21 points per game. They were also 8th in yards given up on defense. So their defense was very good, specifically against the rush. And they only lost Devin McCourty due to retirement. So their defense should be something that they are to rely on. Most books have them about 6.5 or 7.5 total wins. If you see that 6.5, in my opinion, I think that you should hammer that over for the 6.5. 7.5 might be a little tough. But with their tough division and with the Bills and the Dolphins and the Jets could have a really solid defense. Never know what's going to happen with Rodgers. You just never really know what's going to happen in their division, and could be a tough schedule. With that said, as for their floor, I think they could be as low as a 5-win team at the very least. This is if things don't click, if Mac doesn't really develop much, and if their defense doesn't contribute like they did last year, and they don't improve in the run game on offense. However, if their free agent signings do hit and Mac shows a jump, I think they can contend for a wild card spot. I don't think they're quite good enough to win the division and compete at the top. I think that they might be able to, if they get that wild card spot, maybe win a playoff game and get to the divisional round, but I don't think they can get much farther than that. But with that said, with that floor of 5-win team, the ceiling of a wild card team, I would have them about 7-10 or 8-9, maybe a game or two out of the wild card spot. So that's what I got for the Patriots.
Yeah, and I think if they end up 8-9, Belichick's on the hot seat, maybe already fired. Robert Kraft really wants to win again. He's getting up there in age. And if you couldn't tell, Eli's the data nerd. He knows all the numbers and stuff. Us three are really more football guys.
We'll see who's right. We'll see who's right.
At the end of the day, it's still a game, not football. But
so you really think 8-9 could do it for Belichick? Something? I mean, that's not.
Yeah,
I think it should. I'm tired of him. I think he's overrated.
That's from a non-Patriots fan, by the way.
Overrated? Belichick?
I think Tom Brady carried him.
So are you talking about current or all time? We're already getting off track, but current or all time? All time.
Currently, but
are you drinking the Andy Reid Kool-Aid? You think Andy Reid's the greatest head coach of all time?
I think if Belichick doesn't,
Josie, get that look off your face.
I think if Belichick doesn't win this year, yes. I think Andy Reid's got that.
With 2 Super Bowls.
Yes.
I don't know.
I think Brady carried Belichick through all those Super Bowls.
Yeah, but Belichick, just what he's done defensively, like even going back to the Giants.
He's a great mind, but He's
The
so
fact that
stubborn where he ruins the team now too.
He's coached the greatest offensive player of all time in Brady, the greatest defensive player of all time in LT, and the greatest special team player of all time in Matthew Slater.
See,
That's
we
crazy.
Like we talk about Brady carrying Belichick, but at the same time, like we have to state the obvious is that like Brady never had less than a top 5 offensive line and a top 7 defense in his entire career with the Patriots. That's the thing about the Patriots is regardless of how garbage their offense is, how many points per game they put up, their defense is always top 10.
And
As far as the numbers go. Like year in and year out, that's what Bill Belichick does. He could just rely on Tom Brady to run the offense when Brady was there.
You also need to distinguish Belichick the coach versus Belichick the GM. I think the ego's getting in the way there, especially with like receiver development, whatever the heck he wanted to do last year with Patricia and Joe Judge kind of being co-offensive coordinators. Like, that was a joke. Now that Billy O'Brien's back, I think that there's a better chance we see a good side of Mac Jones. And if not, we got Bailey Zappi coming in. So I don't know anything. I don't know if they're a play. I don't like the Zeke signing did nothing for me.
This division is like the AFC North for me. I can see it going either way. I can see the Bills being third in their division this year.
All right, well, we'll actually jump right to the Bills then, and I'm going to be talking about them. I'm very low on them. This is a very important year for them. They remind me a lot of the 2014 Broncos that lost the Colts in the divisional round, and then right after that, they fired John Fox. That's unheard of, firing your coach after making it to the divisional round of the playoffs. They fired him, bringing Gary Kubiak. Next year, they have a great defense, and they carry a broken down Peyton Manning to a Super Bowl win. I kind of view that as where the Bills are. The excuses are just done. Either him or Brandon Beane cannot survive another postseason that they don't make it deep. It's gotten ridiculous. Dalton Kincaid's there. I like the 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver kind of scheme.
Being the GM.
Yep, Brandon Beane's the GM.
I don't think it's him at all. I think it's McDermott.
I think there's going to be a power struggle, and we just saw a power struggle in Tennessee this past year with John Robinson and Mike Vrabel. Vrabel obviously won it. It's going to be interesting to see who would win it now. The defense is healthy. You're going to have Leonard Floyd coming in. Matt Milano's still there. They did lose Tremaine Edmonds.
Von Miller back.
Von Miller's back, hopefully healthy. We'll see if he's kind of on a pitch count. Micah Hyde should be back. Jordan Poyer seems like he has a million injuries every year that he plays through. But we'll see. Ed Oliver, I think, just got re-signed. But also, Leslie Frazier left. And that was weird. Like, he left, didn't know if it was just like a short-term thing and he would be back after a year absence. It sounds like he wants to be a head coach again. Obviously, he was with Minnesota in the 2012 Adrian Peterson MVP season. He wants to be a head coach again. He's kind of been blackballed by the league. It'll be interesting to see if he resurfaces anywhere. But that was weird. And then also the Stephon Diggs thing. Like, people forget that the coach literally said he was concerned about it. Like, it was giving strong Antonio Brown in his final year in Pittsburgh vibes where just something's bound to break. And I don't know if Buffalo... Obviously, Josh Allen's there, so you're always going to be relevant.
Right, so you said you're low on the Bills, but what does necessarily low on the Bills mean? Because low on the Bills could be that they're still going to be easily in the divisional
Don't
round.
worry about
Everybody-
coordinators.
Everybody was talking about the Bills last year like they were the best team in the NFL. So I think even like you mentioned, like low on them could be like, okay, well they're gonna have 6 losses on the season or something like that. Like,
I don't think they're a lock to win the East at all. And then even if they make the playoffs, I think either one or maybe even both of them, the coach and the GM, are going to be on the hot seat. Which to me is kind of why. Which as a Bills fan, that's like unheard of because they're more relevant now than they have been since the mid 90s.
Right.
So, but I truly think that you're wasting Josh Allen's prime. We've seen Patrick Mahomes go to 3 Super Bowls, win 2. We've seen Burrow be in the thick of it every single year. Trevor Lawrence, we'll get to him more later on. Like, you're wasting Josh Allen's prime. And
I don't disagree. I just think that if you're a Bills fan, you should be in a good spot. If you're hearing that their floor people are low on the Bills, that still means that they're still going to be in the top of the division. They're still going to be fighting for it. So it's still something to look forward to. But I don't disagree that they're getting a little too much hype, and you just never know what's going to happen in the playoffs.
all right, we want to jump over to Miami and talk about the Dolphins, Christian.
I am hyped for them this year. I think their defense is really good. They got young guys. Their draft, losing their first round pick, Cam Smith, I think was a steal in the second round. And then they also got Devon Arcane. I think that's how you say it, right?
A-Chain, yeah. Or
A-Chain?
Kane.
A-Chain? I don't know.
Something like that.
Yeah. I loved him in college, and I don't know. Hopefully he could bounce back from that injury, but he could be nuts because they could use him as a receiver and a running back, and he has that speed. And McDaniel's offense is nuts with Tyreek and Waddle in there.
How long is Jalen's injury?
Jalen
Ramsey. How long?
Oh,
is
He's
injury?
going to be
come
out
back.
till November.
Yeah, they said like mid-season
Yeah.
at the very earliest. But
You were talking about the speed. You have him, Robbie / Chosen Anderson, Tyreek, Waddle, Moser,
I forgot about Chosen.
Jeff Wilson. Like, everyone's seen like all the memes right now with Madden. Like, the speed is just
And
ridiculous.
if Tua played decent last year, I think that he put in a ton of work this year. If he could actually be nuts, he looks nuts.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm worried about is his head.
Yeah, it's going to come down to health. We'll see.
And their
Jiu-jitsu,
O-line, their
just,
O-line's got a lot better. The only thing I'm worried about is Armstead with his age, but they are young on the O-line and they built that up.
I think you put it well with Tua, with Armstead, with Devon at running back. Like, they're definitely, you're hype on them, and that's good, but there's just so much that can go wrong with injuries. It has in the past. A lot of people say that they're kind of cursed. I think that can happen again. But at the same time, I mean, if they stay healthy, there's no doubt that they're competing for the top of the division and can make some noise in the playoffs.
I kind of hope they do get JT now if they do trade for him, because that's just that's just a Dolphins thing to do right now. They've just been trading like crazy. Last year, their offense was ranked 7th and their defense was ranked 8th. So obviously, great rankings for them last year.
And the defense is going to get a lot better. Vic Fangio, maybe the best defensive mind of his time, is there. Obviously, wasn't a great head coach, but D coordinator-wise, you can't get any better than that. So it's almost kind of like a Brian Flores to Minnesota situation where no matter what, the defense is going to be better. And then you also have rising stars like Javon Holland. You have Jalen Phillips. You still
They
have
Kalu, or how you said the cornerback's name.
Kadu. Like, Miami definitely is going to be interesting because last year nobody would have wanted to play with them. They were a machine. It was just a clinic.
I
week
also
in and week
think
out.
that Chubb's very underrated.
Bradley
He's
Chubb.
healthy, yes. I think he's a monster.
Oh, well, he had a good rookie year, and then he just...
And then he got hurt, and then last year he started picking up, and then he got traded, and then he got hurt again. I'm pretty sure last year, but like right after he got paid, but I'm high on him a lot too.
Who's the guy opposite him? What, Jalen Phillips? Is that his name?
Phillips.
Yeah,
Phillips.
He hasn't done. He
And
didn't.
they
do
still
much
have
last
Emmanuel
year.
Ogba, too. So they have a 3-headed monster.
Well, Ogba they use on the interior too. They use him. They have that Zyler dude, and then they have Wilkins, which they better pay him because they need him.
And the biggest signing of the offseason, Mike White. They brought in Mike White to back up Tua, Mr.
Effing Mike White. Yeah.
Mr. 400-yard passing in one game and then dip out for the rest of the season.
Tight end, I'm worried about. I was hoping Gesicki was going to be nuts for them because Kittle and 49ers, but
All right.
I don't know who theirs is. Though.
Speaking of Mike White and the Jets, I don't know if we should turn off the lights and go into a darkness retreat or something, but Josie's going to start talking about the Jets and their new quarterback.
Yeah, the Jets are kind of a conundrum to me because there's so many question marks around the team right now. To start, obviously the big one, bringing in Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Rodgers had an awful year last year. I don't think anybody's really willing to argue that he had a good year, especially following back-to-back MVPs and so
COVID MVP.
COVID MVP.
Times 2.
Yeah, but I also think he's the perfect guy for Zach Wilson because they were both so cocky.
Yeah, absolutely. But people also said that about why am I blanking on his name? Josh Rosen too. They were talking about how Josh Rosen was so much like.
But they seem like best friends too, which is good. Because I think Aaron Rodgers actually accepted that he's at the age where he needs to help out with that stuff.
Yeah.
Like
Wilson's shown some growth.
I saw a video of them sitting in a room trying to guess if it was a pass or a run on Rodgers' handoffs. And the very first one, Zach Wilson was the only one to get it right. And he looked over at Rodgers and said, "Hey, you're effing easy." It's just like, and Rodgers like, "What did you just say?"
Like his throwing motion is exactly like Rodgers now.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, and so, I mean, honestly, like, I hope it turns out well because, I mean, obviously, regardless of how it turns out, Rodgers is a first ballot Hall of Famer type guy. Again, regardless of how it goes with New York, I think he's stepping into a situation where the O-line, there's still a lot of question marks there. There's some talent, but at the same time, it's like, with all the Becton question marks and just, I guess, young offensive line is kind of a big question mark.
Yeah, but that's what he had He had a questionable O-line in Packers.
And they might be getting older, though. Jason Peters just said that he would be open to joining them. So they're going to have two of the oldest tackles
I just think
ever.
he's going to be nuts because he has so many weapons, young weapons, too, and then they have the great running back room, and their tight ends are nuts, too.
Yeah.
Easy Abanikanda. Hilda Pitt.
Yeah.
He's going to end up playing.
Yeah.
Because Dalvin Cooks might get suspended still.
Wait, what?
He's still in trouble over the domestic situation. So
I didn't even know that happened.
Yeah, I think real quick to transition back to the Packers line, I think that even if it was kind of a carousel at certain areas, like he always had David Bakhtiari to rely on, and I don't think he has a David Bakhtiari on the Jets. That's my biggest question mark. Obviously, they have some real talent at wide receiver with some of the guys they brought in, and also a guy who I think everybody's expecting to take a huge jump this year with improved quarterbacks, Garrett Wilson. Obviously, Rodgers loves those 17s, and so I think that Garrett Wilson's just going to have a monster year this year for all you fantasy guys out there. Yeah. I know he's going in first for a lot of fantasy drafts anyway, but
Jermaine Johnson's nuts for them on the defense.
Yeah, and honestly, like I think that the defense did a really good job last year. I hope they live back up to those expectations again because it's really hard sometimes for defenses to repeat, especially when you're losing. We mentioned it earlier. We're talking about losing a guy who had almost 70 tackles last year. I mean, Quan Alexander leaving there I think is really big. Obviously, CJ Mosley's still solid. He's still going to be there and make those tackles, but losing a guy who makes that much of an impact is huge.
They have so many safeties, though, that could play in the box, too, now. They loaded up on their secondary, and then their D-line's just as nuts now.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Whitehead. Pitt.
And so, they have really solid guys on defense. It's just a matter of, like, hey, can they put this together consistently year in and year out?
Ashton Davis, Amos, Whitehead, they had Chuck Clark, but then he tore his ACL, and he could play in the box, too, so that sucks that he tore his ACL. But.
Yeah, as far as a floor, again, it's really difficult to say, but I don't really see them going less than around 500. 8, 9, 9, and 8 is really the minimum I see. Especially, they have a good division that they're in, and so like losing divisional games is going to be really detrimental to making playoffs. So I think that can be there. And as far as ceiling, I mean, I don't think that anybody can really argue that they could be a Super Bowl contender if they're willing to or able to put everything together there. As far as things to watch for this year, obviously we mentioned Garrett Wilson just being, really solid. I could think that if this year goes as planned, he could cement himself as like a fringe top 7 wide receiver in the NFL, along with some of those younger guys that are already in that conversation with like, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin, guys like that are just like really young and upcoming and
according to
really
Ryan
solid.
Clark, put George Pickens in that conversation as well.
That was crazy.
I mentioned the loss of Quan Alexander being a potentially big thing this year. And then the really big thing for me is like, hey, if this season doesn't work out with everything that they have, like who's on the hot seat? We mentioned the hot seat earlier. Like, is Rob Saleh on the hot seat? I hope not. I like Saleh. I like the guys coming out of San Francisco in the Shanahan system becoming head coaches. But the big question is like, hey, if this season doesn't go as planned, who's the fall guy? And I think it might be Saleh.
I think it would have to go. Like, I don't think 500 gets him really.
I think
maybe a little more.
I think the
next
only
year.
thing that could get him fired if like Hackett doesn't do anything for them, because Hackett was supposed to be like their big offensive coordinator guy.
But they did so much this offseason. Yeah. It's like if something goes wrong, like somebody's gonna take the fall for it. And it's like who is gonna be the
like Rodgers leaves after 1 year.
Is he gonna retire?
Like mortgage your future and then.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that's my big question is like, who's the fall guy? So and big question mark. So.
Hopefully that doesn't come to that.
Exactly, yeah. So
all right. Well, one of the Jets' main competitors are going to be the Bengals, the favorite right now in the AFC North. Christian, you want to speak about them a little bit?
I am worried about their defense a lot. I think they lost Jesse Bates. I think they should have just paid him. I mean, Jordan.
Even with Dax Hill there?
I mean, they had Dax Hill, but Dax Hill could have played strong safety or corner. I mean, their secondary is very young and has potential because they drafted Jordan Battle, and I liked him a lot in college. But I like Dax Hill a lot. They drafted DJ Turner, which he's a speedster.
Nickel, yeah.
And then they had that Taylor Britt, who he actually did pretty decent for them last year a lot. And then they have Mike Hilton, who can blitz and do it all, which I wish Steelers kept him. And then they have Uzier, who's coming off an injury. He tore his ACL, right?
Yep.
ACL or something with his knee. The only thing that I see them going, I mean, their coaching staff's decent. I don't think Zach Taylor's bad at all. I think Joe Burrow carries them a lot, and Joe Burrow's my favorite quarterback in the NFL. But they have nuts offense still. Their run game, Joe Mixon, he's always at least reliable. And then they have Jamar Chase, who's nuts. And then they have T. Higgins, who I think is just as good, just doesn't get as many targets. And then
Tyler Boyd, Hail the Pit.
He's good for them. And then tight end, I wish they kept Hurts last year, but they got Irv Smith. I don't think he's going to do anything. And then they just keep improving that O-line for them. They brought in Orlando Brown. And then I don't know what they're going to do with Jonah Williams if they are moving him to guard.
Where's Collins? He's right tackle.
Yeah, he's still hurt. He's still on the IR PUP list from last year's injury. And then Ted Karras, who's that good veteran guy. And then they have Kappa from the Bucks. And then their D-line's just good every year.
Yeah, I don't know if
did they lose
healthy,
Reader?
Though.
Did they lose Reader?
Reader's still there. But I don't even know. Like, Burrow's not going to be there week 1, I don't think. I think that, and how comfortable are you really going with Brandon Allen week 1? Like,
well, I think they initially said up to 4 weeks, didn't they? That
Yeah.
Burrow was going to miss.
Well, they said several, and that's like
Several,
weird, like jargon for like
Yeah,
NFL
it's-
terms. Like that's sus.
Yeah.
So
But I still think that
It's like
even
you're
with the
avoiding
calf
something.
strain,
Yeah,
he comes
yeah.
back and then he could. Like even if they don't have the greatest record, they could have the greatest like playoff.
Yeah,
record,
but
so-
in a division like that, and even in a conference like the AFC could be this year in the wild card spots, you don't want to be making up ground after even week 4. You know, if they have a cold start with Burrow not there, and it even takes them a couple weeks to get back into the game, then it could be too late. Where even if they go on a run, they're still fighting for that wild card spot.
And you don't want to rush him back either in the AFC North, which is like the the Black Air
Biggest
Force,
stuff, yeah.
like hood
Yeah.
division, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. Where like they're gonna, I mean, you get punched in the mouth every single game, like
who's
in
there
those
on free
divisional
agency they
games.
could sign,
Carson Wentz.
which he could definitely be good
I-
with them.
But if they were this worried, I mean, wouldn't they have
That's a
signed him
hot take.
already?
if
was
they
a hot
were
take.
worried,
I don't.
if they were worried, I think they would have signed someone.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I don't think
Search
they are.
search
at all.
available quarterbacks. Carson Wentz is the one that comes to mind.
I mean, they could trade.
Christian Hackenberg's probably available.
definitely.
They could probably trade for a quarterback. The
Oh.
only team is Steelers, but I don't want them going to.
Big Nick Foles is available.
We're gonna have to censor that one.
Forget who. Yeah, I mean, and I feel like Wentz talent wise, like Foles, I love him, but I don't really know what he's gonna offer you at this point. Like
My only
Carson
hope
Wentz
this
is
year-
the only guy, and Eli's right; they would have brought him in by now.
Yeah.
And there are going to be guys who fringe should make a team, but they don't, who could be
It
brought
just to me it just depends on how their young secondary goes.
Wait, I take back my statement. Joe Flacco's available. Future Hall of Famer, elite.
Is he
quarterback.
elite? Yeah.
Yeah, Joe Flacco should go back to the AFC North. So,
Carson Palmer. Bring Carson Palmer back.
Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers
Ooh.
was about to come
He-
out last
he-
year for the 49ers.
is this like the most underrated quarterbacks like conversation right now? Like, this might be a
What
whole
39-year-old is gonna come play for the Bengals?
Ben Roethlisberger.
All right, next team.
New subject. All right, so we're gonna actually go to the Steelers. We're gonna have Yinzer Josiah talk about them.
All right, Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to be as unbiased as possible. I am a Steelers fan, but at the
This is
same
about to be
time,
super biased.
I am gonna be as unbiased or realistic as they possibly can. Because again,
17-0.
no. I'm not that guy. All right, so talking about the Steelers. Obviously, they made a ton of moves this offseason, which for any Steelers fans out there, they know that that's not really typical. I think Omar Khan has kind of changed the mentality around the free agency and the idea of like the draft, and like obviously they traded up to get the guy they want, which is very uncommon as far as like guys that they did that in the past for were like, Devin Bush, Ben Roethlisberger, and like Troy, and that's about it. And like the
And
first
Antonio
year,
Holmes,
And
too, I
if,
think.
and,
yeah.
and if Bush probably didn't get hurt, Bush probably would be nuts right now. He was nuts that year.
yeah,
All right, I
he
have
was on track.
PTSD from Devin Bush conversations.
Yeah. But anyway, like I was saying, that's not typical for the Steelers, and so I think that's something that Omar Khan is doing something a little bit different. So like I said, they made a lot of splashes. I think especially on the O-line, which was the big question mark. But I'll get more into it later. It's like I do think that by the end of the year, that O-line actually came together a little bit and played fairly well. Kenny Pickett was only sacked one time in the entire month of I think it was an entire month of January. He was only sacked once. It was only 2 games, but regardless. As far as floor for the Steelers, we talked about this earlier. Is Mike Tomlin, and even last year in an off year, they show that 9-8 is the floor for Mike Tomlin. There's
it's also
not
the
really,
ceiling, though. It's also the ceiling.
It can be the ceiling. It can. But realistically, there's even an off year, 9-8 is the standard, and the standard is the standard. So, as far as ceiling, again, realistically, they could win a playoff game. That's kind of where I'm at. Could they win 2? Maybe. I think that they are a playoff team that could win 1, probably wild card game is what I'm thinking. The defense has improved. The defense is consistent and the same at basically all at all levels. Obviously, they are getting TJ back, which they missed him for 6 games last year, I think. So getting him back, I think that the secondary is much improved from what it was last year. We'll see. I mean, obviously the jury's still out on what Patrick Peterson can do. Joey Porter Jr. is still a rookie. I like KZ. I like Minka. Obviously, they've had dealt with a little bit of injuries to start this year, but hopefully they can shore that up. O-line, like I mentioned, is better than last year. QB's second year in the system, regardless of how Steelers fans feel about the system or the offensive coordinator that's there. It is still a quarterback's second year in that system, which I think is a huge difference between the first year and the second year. If you look at the beginning of last year when Kenny Pickett started versus where he ended, you could see a big jump in the first couple games up until the bye week. After the bye week, they ended up going.
I do feel like he changed it a lot. Even in preseason, you could see the everything changed. It's more infield.
He has more confidence now.
They went 7-2 after the bye, and if you look at it, I mean, the sack numbers went down, the turnover numbers went down. He threw 8 interceptions in the month of October. Outside of the month of October, how many picks did he throw?
1. Yeah.
1. He completely changed it around after their bye week last year. So hopefully that can be something that continues into there, because when a team has a really good defense and can make stops consistently, it's extremely important that the quarterback does not turn the ball over. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing for the Steelers this year is the offense cannot turn the ball over. If they turn the ball over,
one game too, and then most of them weren't even his fault. Jets game.
Yeah, absolutely.
He had to force it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like I said, specifically starting out the season, can they start out consistent and can they end consistent the same way? I don't think that Kenny Pickett needs to be a Joe Burrow, a Patrick Mahomes. Can he be? Maybe. I don't think he needs to be necessarily. I think he needs to not turn the ball over.
Mahomes?
I mean, nobody can be Mahomes. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm saying an upper echelon quarterback is what I'm saying.
We're going to lose a lot of credibility on episode 1. I'm a Yinzer through and through, but let's...
Sure. So what, you think just because he has small hands he can't be Mahomes?
I mean, Burrow has small hands, but I'm sure size doesn't matter for him. So
how do you feel about all this Najee versus Jalen Warren talk?
Don't even get me.
So here's the thing. Okay, the Steelers have a track record of having 2 good running backs. Mm-hmm. Okay, you look at Jerome Bettis and you look at Willie Parker. Willie Parker was good enough to be a starting running back in the NFL for most, if not all, of the other teams. Right? Obviously Jerome Bettis wasn't ever the best in the league, but he was really, really good, elite Hall of Fame type guy. So having
talking about
Bettis, yeah. So having a ground and pound strong guy, sometimes people forget, Najee Harris is a massive guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like Derrick Henry, just small.
He's 1 inch shorter than Henry, listed as 1 inch shorter than Henry, and only 10 pounds lighter. Najee Harris is a massive guy, and he doesn't have the breakaway speed that Henry does. But when you can have that kind of guy to wear down a defense, because it's like tackling a D lineman, then you have Jalen Warren who can come in and Jalen Warren may be able to break off 63-yard touchdown runs like he did in the preseason game. But I think they work better together than either one of them would separately.
Christian, I can't ignore your reaction to the question.
Najee's my guy. I love Najee. Najee and Burrow are my favorite college guys that I've ever watched. Najee was so exciting in college. I think he's good. I think last year the reason why he wasn't that good is because of the what was the metal in his cleat that he had to wear or whatever. But he had in his cleat that he needed.
I'm not sure.
He had something in his cleat he had to wear because his foot injury he was playing with. And then after that, he got better. He got 1,000 yards. He started running more downfield. I just think he got in his head too much that he needs to do more than what he does. But he just needs to hit someone because you saw it last year when he lays the hit or stiff arms them, they can't bring him down.
He stopped trying to do that Le'Veon Bell juke stuff and just ran through people, which I absolutely loved.
He learned that he needed that. He just needs to hit them.
I'll bust Najee's balls a lot on this show probably, so I will come in his defense. Christian's right. He started running the ball harder. He went downhill towards the end of the season. And then also, can one of you pull up Derrick Henry's career stats? Because he took a few years to get started also. I'm not saying Najee...
Henry took like
4.
3 years.
Because it all kind of came alive that year. They went into Kansas City for the playoff game. Mariota caught his own touchdown and everything.
Well, if you remember...
But DeMarco Murray was there. Yeah.
The Titans signed DeMarco Murray after
I'm not saying Najee's going to be Derrick Henry, but in his defense...
It took Derrick until his third season to reach both 1,000 yards and over 10 touchdowns, and then in that fourth year, he exploded with over 1,500 yards, 16 touchdowns.
And now within the third year was his first year without DeMarco.
That was his first year.
Because DeMarco retired right after that. He started, and then he picked it up.
And I know it's nice comparing these types of guys, but we can't just start throwing the Najee Derrick Henry. Like I understand, but it's just a slippery slope.
I'm glad that we gave a DeMarco Murray shout out.
Right,
so
yeah.
that was
carried my fantasy football season
Derrick
like
Henry's
6 years ago.
Absolutely.
Would not have been.
Henry's starting to go downhill. There's a new running back every year.
I'll never forget DeMarco Murray because he won me a fantasy championship.
He
did.
And that's why running backs don't matter. Just run them into the ground on a contract year. All right. Well, I'm sure that's going to be a conversation throughout the podcast. Also, clearly Steelers are going to be talked about a lot. Another team that we're going to talk about is Cleveland. Eli, you want to talk about Deshaun Watson and the Browns?
Yeah, for sure. So first mentioning just the AFC North, they're playing the AFC South this year, which is pretty weak. Hopefully they should pick up some wins there. And then also the NFC West, which I think a couple top-heavy teams, but overall some wins there can be picked up from the North. Obviously a strong division. As for who they added in the offseason, not much in the draft due to that haul that they had to spend for Deshaun. You could see Cedric Tillman at receiver as a third-round pick at some time. And then also DeJuan Jones at tackle. They also signed Dalvin Tomlinson, Juan Thornhill, Anthony Walker, center and Ethan Pockich, Rodney McLeod, and then they also traded for Zadarius Smith. They were fairly average on offense in yards per game, bottom half in passing yards per game. You'd probably guess that the rushing game carried them, and it did. Sixth in rushing yards per game at 146 yards and just below the Patriots at that similar 21 points per game. So offense was a bit up and down. Really need to rely on that rushing game. They were middle in the pack on defense. They were top 5 in passing yards allowed. However, they gave up less than 200 yards passing per game.
Wasn't Denzel Ward though injured for most of the year last year? I think Denzel Ward was out for a long time.
Yeah, which is good. It's just a good sign that they gave up less than 200 yards with one of the top corners out.
They could be, if they get their defense under control, like they say, it's going to be good every year because they actually loaded up. They could be. Our division is just nuts. I can see everyone in our division making the playoffs.
So to your point with the defense, obviously, so something's got to be up if they only gave up 196 yards per game passing, but they were middle of the pack, and that's because they were awful against the run. So obviously they had a lot of those signings at linebacker and D-line in their front seven, including the Zadarius Smith trade to try to make up for that, and then also help out their pass rush to just try to keep up with the other AFC North teams. We talked about how nuts some of those defenses can be. Most books have them at about 9.5 total wins. If I had to choose, I would probably lean towards the under, honestly. I think it's a bet that I would stay away from, though, at 9.5. They're around 500 just because of the question mark of Deshaun Watson and what's going to happen with him. But I think the floor is probably around that 7 wins. I don't think they're going to go much lower unless they're crippled by injuries. However, if they do improve the run defense with those front 7 signings, if they keep it simple on offense, I think just feed Chubb and then let Deshaun go play action. I know, and it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. But hopefully they can go play action with Deshaun. Deshaun showed some flashes last year, obviously, and then years before with the Texans. So if he can get in a groove, I really think that they can make a test for the division and win the division. And at their very top ceiling, I think they can make it to an AFC championship game. I just don't think they're quite with the top teams in the conference just yet with the Bills, even though Hayden might be a little low on the Bills, and then with the Chiefs. So I don't think that they're quite at that Super Bowl appearance yet, but I think they can ride around that conference championship. But I think if I had to choose, I'd choose about 9 or 10 wins, obviously, where their total wins are, and compete for a wild card spot. with a likely first round exit, maybe getting a win, like Josie said with the Steelers. So I don't know. I'm hopeful for the Browns, but obviously the Browns are the Browns.
Do you think Nick Chubb's the best back in the league?
I think overall right now, no,
Most
just
consistent.
I think
consistent.
and they just need to feed him because I think he could be the best back in the league if they consistently feed him. I think this is a year that, once those running backs hit those, again, this is going to be a very frequent conversation with running backs that we'll have throughout the podcast. I think this is about the time with Chubb where you'll see nuts running backs start going downhill. So I'm a little worried about it this year. But I think he's easily a top 3, top 5 back in the league. I don't know if I'd put him at 1 though.
What are your thoughts on Jerome Ford?
I mean,
Do you think he's at number 2?
I think he's 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked him in college at Cincinnati. He's fun. He'll be a good spell guy for Chubb.
Yeah.
Obviously, Chubb wasn't necessarily an every down back in the past couple of years with Hunt, so I think it's important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they just need to feed Chubb and keep it simple, which I'm a little worried that they're not going to do.
They loaded up on receivers. They have Cooper, Elijah Moore is looking good with
Right, Donovan Peoples-Jones still, and then obviously Cedric Tillman.
and they're so young.
Said
Both
DPJ,
of
Right,
them are
little,
they still have
Browns
Njoku.
fan base.
Yeah, and they still have, right.
And
So
the Joku too.
right.
They're going to live and die with number 4. I mean, people forget before he started to slide into DMs all the time, Deshaun Watson was the quarterback.
He's a winner. He's a winner. Like, there's no way.
Somebody
you can't,
compared him
yeah.
to like the MJ of the NFL.
It was
Yeah.
between
Right.
him and Mahomes
That
before
was,
he got out.
I think it was Davos.
And it's ironic because he was the
said that.
poster child.
Yeah.
Like, he was the poster child for nice quarterback.
Right.
Like, just like
Clean guy at
great
first.
guy. All he did was win, and then obviously
Blew up.
our taste of him has soured,
Yeah.
rightfully so. But
He was a dumb.
it's gonna see. Oh, there's Christian's first swear word. We are gonna have a swear jar for Christian during this podcast.
Don't get this topic started because it makes me mad. It
It's
makes
fine.
me want him out.
But I mean, if Deshaun can play even remotely like he did a few years ago, Amari Cooper's one of the most consistent wide receivers. Nick Chubb, although underused, is gonna have over 1,200 yards. Cedric Tillman's been balling out. It's gonna be interesting. And then I don't think anyone else in this division is really on the hot seat. But as I said, they're living and dying with Deshaun, where if it doesn't work this year, it's not really fair to him, but Stefanski might just get the short end of the stick.
Depending on what Baltimore does, though, I think Harbaugh should be on the hot seat, depending on how the defense plays and the new coordinator.
Perfect transition.
So I am
segue.
going to be talking about the Ravens. I kind of view them as the anti-Steelers. They're very similar teams. The Steelers the past few years have started off terribly slow with some of the worst records ever, and then they always get hot randomly and somehow end up in the mix. Baltimore's kind of the opposite. They hang up there with the Chiefs and the Bills early on, and then past couple seasons, Lamar gets hurt, Tyler Huntley comes in, they start to fall off, and then even last year, they barely make the playoffs. Almost beat Cincy, but I kind of view them right around the Steelers with a little bit more variation. They're not quite as consistent. They offer up a little bit of a higher ceiling, but also offer up a little bit of a lower
They
floor.
just have so much potential with all their young guys.
The talent is ridiculous.
Like their receiving's nuts if those young guys like Duvernay can develop. Like he started balling out a little bit.
And you know what's
last year.
crazy? Duvernay's probably wide receiver 5 right now. Like that's like Zay Flowers. He was my number 1 wide receiver coming out of the draft. I think he's Antonio Brown minus all the character issues. He's insane. OBJ, I think, still has the speed as long as he can just stay healthy. And then Isaiah Likely looked great in flashes last year.
True.
Mark Andrews, top 3 tight end, probably. I feel like
Yep.
that's a safe bet. He's number 3 behind Kittle and Kelsey.
Can't really argue not top 5. I think you could
Yeah.
argue somewhere in the area of he's somewhere between 3, 4,
If
and
he
5.
bounces back between the year before he got hurt, he was in the conversation with Kelsey.
Yeah. And it's crazy because Isaiah Likely was drafted semi-early, early to mid-round out of Coastal. They actually picked a tight end that same year before him and Charlie Kohler from Iowa State. Obviously, Iowa State has some other issues going on right now, but he's a consistent guy too. So they really have a 3-headed monster at tight end. You still have Nelson Aguilar down the field.
Well, they did the same thing with Mark Andrews. He was the second tight end they selected.
Yeah,
They took Hayden Hurst. They took Hayden Hurst in the first round.
Oh,
And then they selected Mark Andrews in the second or third, I think.
Second, I believe.
Second?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have a track record of doing that. And I don't know.
But as Christian, I think, said, like, it's going to come down to health. Lamar, whatever the heck has been going on, whether it was the contract or not, past 2 years, whatever it was, kept him off the field. Running backs, it's kind of weird because it's a bunch of just like mid guys. J.K. Dobbins, when he's healthy, looks explosive, but his knee also looks beat up, almost like Todd Gurley's was. They signed Melvin Gordon. Gus Edwards is there. But really, the number one returning guy that's huge for them, Ronnie Stanley.
Yeah.
People forgot about him. He was
arguably
arguably the best tackle in the league. He hasn't really played the past couple of seasons. And then with Orlando Brown leaving to go to Kansas City
They
when they
have
initially
Morgan
traded him.
Moses, they have Linderbaum, they have Stanley, they had Powers. I don't know who replaced him.
They have Zeitler.
Yeah, Zeitler's there. And thanks for saying that. There's some young talent, and specifically from the Big Ten. You have Tyler Linderbaum, one of my favorite centers of all time coming out of the draft. Super small, super fast and athletic. Looks crazy. If you have a chance, go look at the wrestling highlights. David Ojabo.
We don't know what he can do.
He might have been better than Aiden Hutchinson coming out of the draft, to be honest. But then he tears his Achilles. We didn't really see anything last year. And then also...
Adafio win.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, they just have some freaks on the line.
Oh my gosh.
So there's two edge rushers that need to step up.
Then
They
have
just bring in
Roquan
Clowney.
Patrick.
And then I'm also going to group in Kyle Hamilton with all the NCAA issues going on right now. Notre Dame's going to be going to the Big Ten before long. So I'm going to group Kyle Hamilton in there. If they can get those Big Ten guys to just develop a little bit, talent-wise, Baltimore might be second to none, not only in the AFC, but in the NFL.
Because they still have Humphrey. Their corners are sketchy.
I mean, Marcus Peters gone. And
Their second guy was Mullen, and he got hurt.
Trayvon Mullen.
They just signed Ronald Darby, right?
Darby.
Yeah.
The only good thing I would
see
say about their secondary is they had a lot of young rookies last year that played with all their injuries. And so they have playing time where they could be good maybe, but I don't know.
They should have brought back Marcus Peters, though. You're right. Like, he just signed with Raiders. They had a long off season to try and bring him back. I don't know if the money wasn't there or what, because I know he's not making a ton in Vegas.
So is JPP still there?
JPP is a free agent right
So
now.
lost JPP and Justin Houston.
Yep, Houston
So
just
two
signed with Carolina.
older, but
They just signed Clowney. They just signed Clowney.
Yeah, but
that's right,
I'm
they did
taking
sign Clowney.
Houston. Maybe not JPP, but I'm taking Houston over Clowney, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
Especially
yeah, I
from a
would
straight
too.
pass rushing
I
standpoint.
would too,
I know.
but just think they have Clowney, just in case the job was not good. They have Adafe Owe, who had like his rookie year, he was nuts. And I don't know what happened with him second year. I don't know if he got hurt or not, but he's fell off. Hopefully he could be nuts, like as we are.
Did you guys see the first video that came out about Jadeveon Clowney at camp?
Mm-mm.
He ran a slant. He was running slants. Like he caught the ball. It's like,
The
why is
one-year
this why is this what this guy is doing right now?
The 1 year Baltimore doesn't need receiver help. They have Jadeveon Clowney running slants.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like edge rusher would be a spot where they probably
Interior
should look.
D line's
Melvin
questionable
Ingram.
though, right? They had that young guy they just locked up, but they lost Calais,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't think they have.
Right now they have
Tyrese.
Broderick Washington, Michael Pierce, and Justin Metabike.
Oh, they do have Pearson.
Pierce is solid.
Menabike
Those
was the
middle
guy they just locked
linebackers
up.
are scary.
Oh,
though.
it's
If we're talking about
ridiculous.
the interior,
It's insane.
Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith inside is just an
All I'm saying is
athletic
Roquan
freak.
couldn't
Yeah.
cover Najee in the last game of the year. That's all I'm saying.
So Christian's on the Najee train. But then you still have
And then Najee stole the talent. He was.
you have
I
Trent
love that for
Simpson
him.
and Malik Harrison still
I was
behind
so
them
mad
too.
when they got Simpson.
So
They just draft people they don't even need to all the time. They just go for
They
the
take
talent.
best available.
Pittsburgh and Cleveland could honestly use a couple of Baltimore's linebackers.
Like I want, you knew I wanted,
100%.
you know I wanted Steelers to get Simpson. I loved him a lot.
Yeah,
They
I
slipped in
do
the
think
draft.
Quan Alexander is going to be good this year, but I mean he's not Roquan Smith and he's not Patrick Queen. So
Going back to
They're just
Pittsburgh
young.
just real quick, the 1 year stopgap solutions at linebacker has to stop at some point.
well they're going to miss on the linebacker.
Well, let's go through. We have Mark Barron, John Bostic.
Shazier and Timmons were our last long-term
Yeah,
guys.
they were the last long-term guys. I mean, Miles Jack just retired. He was there
Vince
for a
Williams
year.
for a while.
Vince Williams, Avery Williamson. Like,
And Lawrence Timmons was retired after that 1 year with Miami.
yeah, he signed a 2 year deal with Miami and then retired. But I don't know. The Ravens, I feel like, are very similar to the Steelers, with a little bit more variation. They might have a little bit of a higher ceiling, but also they have a little bit of a lower floor.
I think Holcomb stays for a little while, but what I got with how Khan's going, I wouldn't be shocked if Khan does like a holdout trade with like a player from any position. that we need it. Like if we need a linebacker and someone's holding out, like Devin White.
I was gonna say Devin White said he wanted to trade. I don't know if they're gonna honor it, but like
I'm not gonna lie to you. Like first rounder's questionable.
I feel like trade
it could be
deadline,
like a Minka situation. Like I
Because
was scared of Minka.
Roquan went to Baltimore for a second rounder at the deadline last
Yes.
year, right? So I could see White being moved at the deadline. I don't see it.
I don't see
being
us
moved
going for him, but that would
Devin
be
White's who I wanted
nuts.
in the draft anyway. Like over Devin Bush. I wasn't mad about the Devin Bush pick at the time, but like
I just didn't want
Devin White was the better middle linebacker,
Oh,
even
I
in
love
college.
Devin White.
Like
Yeah, the Devin White was nuts that 1 year, and then he fell off last year. But I still think he could be the guy this year. Because is he holding out? Or is he still playing?
Devin White.
Yeah.
I think he reported he's playing. I don't think Tampa Bay is budging.
Oh, I don't think they are
So
either.
at least not till the deadline.
Like I'm not gonna lie to you. Like if it's deadline and we're a playoff team, if we go a first rounder, it could be like a Minka situation. I was sketched out with doing a first rounder Minka, and Minka's like the best safety in the league between him and
First
Devin.
rounder.
that was the first.
If we're playoff bound during like trade deadline and we go for him, I would be fine giving up a late.
and
first
you're
rounder.
saying we referring to the Steelers.
Yes.
around here, that's what we.
Yeah,
mean.
if you can't establish, there are a lot of Steeler fans in the room.
I would do that.
Minus myself.
If we're a playoff team, I would gladly give a first rounder for him.
And then just resign or give him an extension right then too.
Yeah, because he already did his 5th-year option. I mean,
See, that's the thing. You're giving up a first
it's
rounder
depending.
for.
But like you don't know with that
Could
situation
be
because like
rental.
he could be the type of player if he's out of Tampa Bay, he could be happy there to go on the franchise tag for a year. You don't know if he wants that or not.
I don't know.
I don't know about a first rounder for a
That's
guy
a
that's not
hefty
signed
price.
through.
And off-ball linebackers, just in general. Like, I'm a big pick guy. So
But that's a lot of what
Yeah.
ifs.
But also if there's a big guy for agency, I want Steelers to get him.
Well, that's the thing. If the Steelers were to do that, they run into a Laramie Tunsil situation where he holds all of the power because they gave up so much to get him and he wasn't under contract. So he had every single ounce of power
Right.
in the negotiations.
I mean, if you give up a first rounder for him, you're basically saying like we're gonna win the Super Bowl or we're getting very close this year. And I don't know if that can happen just with adding him, unless the Steelers look amazing.
Well, if he
outside
bounces
middle
back
linebacker.
from that breakout year he had, then yeah, we could be there.
Christian,
If
it
Pickett
is,
takes that big bounce.
it is August
a lot of what ifs.
22nd, and we have not even kicked off the 2023 season, and you're looking ahead to next year's free agency to sign somebody big. We still have a full football season.
We
to
need a middle
enjoy.
linebacker.
I'm looking forward to Thursday night, week 1, Detroit, Kansas City. Since Christian loves talking about the Steelers, one of Kenny Pickett's bright spots last year was against the Raiders on that Franco Harris game, scoring the touchdown to George Pickens. I'm going to talk about the Raiders, and yikes. In a stacked AFC, they might be the only team that has zero optimism. The only other team that kind of comes to mind is Houston. But then in Houston, you have Will Anderson, you have C.J. Stroud, a new head coach. There's at least something to build there for the future. For the Raiders, I love Josh McDaniels. I'll defend him till the day I die. But Jimmy Garoppolo is their quarterback. Aiden O'Connell is their quarterback of the future right now? Question mark. Like, there's nothing to be excited for. Josh Jacobs, whether he reports, which I think he will, but even if he doesn't, I don't really. That doesn't
You
make
could be excited about O'Connell, dude. He's been balling out. You
I
don't know
The
that.
ceiling.
You don't know that.
If you have to argue about a 4th-round quarterback being your excitement,
I would not
that's
be.
going to be.
Dak
I could
Prescott's
see.
a
I could
fourth-round
see
quarterback.
O'Connell going
What?
in this year.
Dak.
If Jimmy G.
Okay, but that's fine. But we're not arguing even their floor or their ceiling or their floor for next year. I mean, O'Connell, even if he does come in the
I
middle of the
think
year,
he
even
would
if he is their future guy, he's not someone that I don't think he's going to be someone that goes and wins games for them this year.
And are you like, let's say Aiden O'Connell, Jimmy G gets hurt because we all know it's going to happen. O'Connell comes in and plays solid, kind of reminiscent to
It'll
a team
be a
we're gonna
Sam
talk-
Howell situation. I feel like.
Davis Mills, same thing with him. Kind of like he was a 3rd-round pick. He played. He didn't play bad, but there's nothing special. Next year, if you have an early pick where you're looking to trade up, you're seriously going to say, let's give Aiden O'Connell another year to develop when there's Drake May, Michael Penix, Caleb Williams. Like, there's just so much of a higher ceiling.
Could have said that about this year with the Commanders, with Falcons, if they wanted to.
But
trade
I
up.
think Mills is a very good comparison for for the Raiders this year and for O'Connell, and they just went and got Stroud because they had to. You couldn't pass on him.
Minshew with the Jaguars. He played really well, especially with the team that was around him. But Trevor Lawrence, they're not going to turn down Trevor Lawrence. So there's just nothing exciting to me. I think if Jacobs comes back, which he should, because
Pay him.
if he doesn't come back soon, they're going to pull the tag. I don't think McDaniels and Dave Ziegler wanted to tag him. I think they just did it as a PR move. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk's been on top of that. I think that they did it PR-wise. He led the league in rushing. You saw the lights flicker out. It's because the gods just know that running backs should not be paid in the NFL.
So why are the Raiders close, like, in a year or two? Are they close to
contending.
in a year or two?
Heck no.
Then why pay him? Why would you pay?
Well, why not trade him then? They're
Because
not trading him.
You're not going to get any value.
Yeah.
See, I don't
Then,
think
but
that
you might as well.
I'd rather
there's
trade
no
him than
point
sign him.
getting
I'm
rid of
just-
the franchise tag and getting nothing at all. I mean, yeah, it sucks that you could only get like maybe a 5th round pick if you do.
I'm not
He can't
arguing
sign
against
a
not
long-term
trading him.
extension anymore. No team's going to trade for him.
talking about Jacobs still.
Yeah. The
And that's-
deadline's passed. He's playing for that $10 million.
Yeah. And honestly, from my perspective, it doesn't seem like the Raiders is like a player desirable place to be. Because, I mean, you look at how they treated, like, Khalil Mack, right? Like, they treated him like he was expendable. And then what
Well,
was...
that's Gruden era.
Yeah, and then
Gruden
what
era.
happened in the next press conference? Gruden's like, oh, I wish we had an elite pass rusher. It's like, well, you did have an elite pass
Yeah.
rusher.
Well, didn't he also
Look
say
how
he
they treated-
regrets trading Mac?
It's like,
Yeah,
they
but-
benched...
Hindsight's 2020,
Yeah,
though.
they benched their franchise quarterback at the end of the year. It's like, okay, I understand what happened. Listen.
You have to say that was a business decision.
But the big one, and the one that we're talking about right now, is Josh Jacobs. They declined his 5th-year option. For a first-round running back, I feel like that's a bit disrespectful, and I think that's part of the reason that Jacobs is holding out, and I don't blame him. Because they basically said, like, hey, we don't even want to exercise this rookie contract in order to keep you for a 5th year. We think you're expendable. He goes off and has a prove-it year where he's like, hey, I'm going to go get something from somebody. And now they're like, oh, no, we want you the whole time. It's like, no, you kind of already, like, you made your bed and now you have to lay in it.
Like, I'm not
only-
gonna lie to you. I feel like Saquon proved that he deserves to at least get a contract, and he didn't get a contract. He battled through those injuries.
Again,
He
this
bounced
is
back.
Saquon's
this
in
is
a whole other category.
But
than
wait,
Jacobs,
He bounced
though.
back this year, though.
But
No,
again,
you
this
can say
isn't
that
this
about
isn't very
Jacobs.
much of a player argument. It really is a position argument.
Yeah.
I
And
think running backs should get paid.
Saquon's level is way different than Josh Jacobs' level. Josh Jacobs might have had a better season than Saquon last year, but Saquon's ceiling
Yes,
is
Saquon is a better
game-changing.
athlete, but Jacobs is still a good receiving back too. Just
That's what he
No,
was,
there's
and
nothing-
that's what he was
yeah.
at Alabama. He was a receiving back. And what did they do with him for the 3 years that they had him for the first 3 years of his career? They tried to use him as like a ground and pound
it was
guy.
like-
They
he had
never
like 10
once played
catches
to
a
his.
year.
I'm not blaming
Yeah.
I'm not
They never
blaming
once
Josh
played to his
Jacobs at all.
experience.
I'm not blaming Josh Jacobs at all.
And I don't
I'm
think
just
he's
not
a bad player, but he's not.
I'm just not blaming the Raiders either. I understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Eli's looking up Josh Jacobs' receiving stats the first few years because I know it was
They
only
were
few.
garbage. And
Yeah.
he was a really
His
great
first year-
And
his
receiver.
I
first
feel
year
like
with
at Alabama.
let's say they do pull the tag, Zamir White. I think one of their few
solid.
strong points is the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Zamir White could rush for
Yeah.
1,000 yards, and then
Isn't
all
their
of a
O
sudden,
lines? Isn't their O line awful?
They lost
I-
what?
I
They
Shaq?
only have Colton Miller, right?
I think their O line.
I think they lost Shaq Mason. Maybe that's 2 seasons ago.
Shaq Mason's on Houston. He went from Tampa to Houston.
Yeah.
He had 20 catches his first year for 166 yards. Second year, 33 catches for 238. And then in his third year, he did have 54 catches, but the yards didn't go up much. It was around 350.
That is more than I thought, but yeah.
But also, you gotta counter in that
Again, I think Jacobs is a good running back.
Gruden era, they went for nobody.
No,
on
I think
offense.
Jacobs is a good running back. I don't blame him at all. I just don't blame the Raiders for not signing him either. I understand.
I just think if you
both
don't
sides.
want him, just get
He's a
rid
good
of him.
running back,
They should
but-
just let him hit free agency this year.
The most exciting part of the Raiders to me are Marcus Peters, an old cornerback, and then Michael Mayer, the tight end. from
Michael,
Notre Dame.
yeah.
It would now technically the edge rushers. If
You're
Chandler-
not excited in Wilson?
Tyree Wilson, Chandler Jones, and Max Crosby. There's a potential there, but I don't know. Like, what's that potential actually going to look like? As a McDaniels fan, I want the Raiders to do well. I just don't see it. I think that the ceiling is super low. And I think that the floor is also super low. I think that we might be talking about them with the number 1 overall pick, picking Caleb Williams next year. And I don't think that's far-fetched. Like, I think that's if we're like every year, there's always a couple coaches that don't even get the full season.
Caleb Williams is not McDaniel's type quarterback. I just don't.
And I don't disagree with that, but fine, just for the sake of argument, Drake May. What if McDaniels isn't there? What if Lincoln Riley comes up to the NFL from USC? He gets hired by
That
them.
makes sense. I'm fine.
But so I'm just not high on the Raiders at all.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's doubting you there, but we'll move on to the Chargers now. So again, as I like to note, just with their schedule, the AFC West plays the AFC East, which is very strong this year, as we talked about earlier, and then also the NFC North, which has a lot of young teams with some high hopes. As for who the Chargers added in the draft, they added another big receiver to go along with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Quentin Johnson from TCU. They also added Thule, the edge rusher from USC. They signed Eric Kendricks, Troy Pipkins, who's a right tackle, and Morgan Fox, who's a D end. Last year, they were a top 10 offense in yards per game, which might have shocked a lot of people, but they were actually third worst in rushing yards per game. So maybe that's a little sentiment to their rushing game, and maybe that's another point of they should have signed Jacobs. But again, that's another conversation, one that we kind of just had. They did have a below average defense, however. They really struggled against the rush. They gave up close to 150 yards on the ground per game. And they also lost Kyle Van Noy, Drew Tranquil, and Bryce Callahan to free agency. We talked about a lot of teams' pass rushes. Chargers need to have their pass rush get to the quarterback with Bosa and Khalil, and then Thule as well, who I just said they got from the draft. I think they need to do their thing to keep the offenses off schedule so they don't really have to worry about their rushing defense as much. Even though they have, Kenneth Murray and Eric Kendricks as those inside linebackers. Most books have them at around 9.5 total wins. I would lean towards the over, but like the Browns, I would also stay away from this bet, specifically with how tough their schedule is.
No, how Staley coaches.
Yeah, but you never know. That could give them a couple wins too. But it's just a bet that I would stay away from. I don't think their floor, though, is much lower than 7 wins, as long as Eckler and those receivers stay healthy, along with Herbert. And I think if Herbert continues to impress and they're able to, get a little more out of their rush offense and defense, I do think they have a legit shot at winning the division. I think they can compete with the Chiefs if all goes right, and can make some noise and maybe make it to an AFC Championship game. Something that might come up later in this podcast or in other episodes is I was a huge Herbert hater out of college, and it's a take that I was obviously wrong on, but one that I'm not going to give up on. And so
I was gonna say, I feel like you're still
I'm not giving up on it.
Yeah.
So it might be a joke here or there that you hear. So now I'm just going off Herbert can't win playoff games like last year. So obviously that's a concern. They couldn't finish against the Jags. I think most likely they're a 10-win season. I don't think they win the division. I think they can, but I don't think they do. I think they get a wild card berth and win a playoff game, and that's about it. Again, it all rides on health and both their rush defense and rush offense and using Eckler correctly.
All right, my question with running backs again. Do you think Eckler deserves to get paid? Because every year he's proved that he...
Again, I'm just a running... It's not an Eckler...
They gave him like an extra 2 minutes. Eckler is the perfect example of why you don't pay a running back.
It's not an Eckler
Gordon
thing.
Was holding out, and then look up where Austin Eckler went to college. I don't even know.
Well, Melvin Gordon was a first-round pick, wasn't he?
Yep.
And then Austin Eckler was, what, third? I mean, I can't...
Austin Eckler and James Conner, what they did to Le'Veon Bell and Melvin Gordon is why you don't pay running backs. Conner and Eckler outplayed Bell.
We're going to keep having this argument. It's not an Eckler is bad argument. It's not. It's just a running back argument.
Western Colorado University. They found one of the best running backs in the NFL right now from Western Colorado University. There is no need to pay a running back. And they gave him the benefit of the doubt. They gave him a decent contract when he didn't really do anything. And then it obviously worked out, and he deserves a little bit of a raise now. But he's really the argument for why there's no need to pay a running back. You'll find somebody. There's so many Division One.
And again, that's not us arguing that Eckler's a bad running back at all. It's a running back argument. It's not a player-specific argument.
You might as well just move your position to receiver then, dude. You might as well just...
If you're a running back...
Running backs want to.
Running backs might as well just...
Jahmyr Gibbs,
stop. It might as well just be a pass game now, not even running.
Well, no, that's not the thing. It's not that it is a pass game, but that's not the issue with running backs. It's that they just fall off so quickly, and you can pick somebody up from Western Colorado University who's then a top 5 running back in the league and someone that's arguing to get paid. So again, running back, I'm not saying running backs aren't getting screwed. It's just the way of the game. It's what's happening, and you can't deny it. You're not just going to give a running back because he was good. If your analytics say that he's going to go downhill, which a lot of running backs are after their 5th or 6th year once they hit that 26 years old, then why would you sign him?
Here comes Eli with his analytics.
Yeah, my big question about the Chargers year in and year out is like, can they win the close games? And honestly, that's what it comes down to. They are a good, talented team, and they add good players. Like last year, like we talk about them adding Khalil Mack, right? It's like we're talking about Khalil Mack, a guy who was, in the conversation with like Aaron Donald at the beginning of their careers for how good they were at like rushing the passer and being a defensive player. So you look at that, and you look at Joey Bosa, who's already there, and you're like, why are they losing these close games?
And Joey was out most of last year too,
Well,
so
also,
they can keep
all
him
of their
and Mac
losses,
healthy.
They also brought in Joseph Day, who had a great year with the Rams, and I just think if he just fell off there, though.
Yeah, and a lot of these games that they lose, almost all of them, I think, are one possession games. So it's like, what is the issue there? Is it coaching? It happened with Anthony Lynn. It's happening with Brennan Staley. Like, is it a coaching issue that they're losing these games that they can't win it at the end? Like,
Well, with Joseph Day is the same scheme as what he was in LA.
Yeah, because Staley transferred over from D coordinator. But I think that the Chargers are similar to the Bills in the fact where good might not be good enough. Herbert's not on Josh Allen's level, but he's another one where you haven't won a playoff game yet. Like, you don't want to waste that
he
kind
should
of
have.
time.
They were
Well, he never
27
will.
nothing.
So
Yeah.
They were 24-0.
And the game was also.
Yeah.
So if they do
The
He
game
got
well,
through,
also,
like,
the
4
the
picks.
refs also missed the call.
They
man.
have
but you
another-
can't even let that get close
Yeah.
enough to where the refs can miss a call.
if they have another embarrassing first round exit, do they kind of say goodbye to Brandon Staley? He goes back to Sean McVay, Daddy McVay, and then they just promote Kellen Moore. We're going to talk about Washington next week with Eric Bieniemy and Ron Rivera. They might do the same thing.
Yeah.
But do you just say, all right, here's a talented offensive coordinator. Maybe he can be the missing piece to help us get to the next level because our current guy is above average, but he's just not cutting it when you have a premier talent like Justin Herbert.
100%.
All right. The next guy, definitely not a premier talent, but he does have a QB guru coaching him now. The Broncos. Broncos country.
That's rad.
There we go. All right, Josie, hit it.
Broncos are a tough team to analyze because, again, on paper, they should be really good. They have a guy who, at quarterback, who has won a Super Bowl and who has been to another Super Bowl and was gonna win it until there was a bad play call. I think most people would agree that was a bad play call. And so, like, when you look at that, it's like, okay, well, they should be good. They have a lot of talent on defense. They have a decent young running back. They have two good wide receivers who should be good. I think the big question mark is their offensive line is bad and has been bad for a long time. And I think that, realistically, like, their floor is like probably a top 7 pick in the draft next year. I was originally going to say 5, but I think
they don't
somewhere
even have their pick though. They gave it to the Saints
I think they have it next year. They gave away last year and this year.
because they know they're gonna be bad.
They also got one back for Chubb, I believe.
They got it from Miami.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think they gave that up to the Saints.
Yeah, I looked it up earlier, and the latest years that they gave up was 2023, and so they should have all their picks next year, assuming that
They don't have a second round, but they do have their own
So
pick
one
for
thing
the
that
first
is
round.
promising,
Okay.
Russ is running
Second.
pretty well for them. He did
Yeah,
good against
and
the
so
Raiders.
I mean, honestly, like realistically, their floor top 5 to 7 pick, just because they can't seem to put it together. As far as their ceiling, again, I mean, we mentioned it, like the quarterback guru, the coach coming in there. If he can change the culture, if he can turn things around, if he can instill confidence or whatever Russell Wilson might need in order to turn it around in him, then they could be a team that makes a wild card. I think that they probably lose that wild card game, in my opinion. I don't know that they're good enough to like take that step into the next one. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I talked about Sean Payton. Can he turn the culture around? They have a culture there. Like, I mean, say what you want about Sean Payton calling out Nathaniel Hackett a little bit, but I think that the culture in general was bad there in Denver. And so that's what I think he was maybe referring to a little bit there. The O-line is bad. Russ is playing JV. Question marks at pass rusher. They have Baron Browning, Randy Gregory, and Frank Clark. And so, like, there's some big questions. Yeah, but there's some question marks. It's like Baron Browning has had 1 year. Randy Gregory has been good, but I think he had struggled with some injuries last year. And then Frank Clark is aging. The first team offense took basically an entire half in their preseason game against like second stringers to put up any points. And the only reason they did is because it was 4th down and they were going for it in the red zone, and the defense ran like a cover 0 basically. And so Jerry Jeudy was wide open on a slant for a touchdown. And so, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the Broncos this year? I mean, again, they could be a decent team with a quarterback that plays really well, or they could be a team that's just really bad. If they have another failure of a season, I think people start asking, is it time for Russ to retire? I think we're at that point now where, like, if he has 2 really bad seasons in a row.
If they force him into retirement.
Yeah, and then the conversations about a Sutton or a Jeudy trade are going to start up again, too. So let's say they get into week 4 and they have 1 win. Like, the conversation's going to start leading up to the trade deadline of, like, should they trade Sutton? Should they trade Jeudy?
All right, the producer is telling me that we need to take a break, so when we come back, we'll talk about the Chiefs and the AFC South. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Second and Short podcast. I'm Hayden Ford. We're going to go right back into it, the Kansas City Chiefs, and Christian, take it away.
I'm iffy with the Chiefs this year.
What
do you mean by iffy?
I think
you were low on
I
the. Is it the same as Hayden's low on the Bills? You're iffy on the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think they're making the playoffs no matter what. But I could see them losing any time in the playoffs. Dude, it's Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid. Yes.
Yeah.
They have a young defense that could still be good. Their draft I did not like at all. Receivers are always questionable. You see Mahomes what he can do without receivers.
I don't think that's a hot take though, do you? That they can lose in their first game of the playoffs. I don't think that's
But that's
right.
The,
I mean,
that's
that's
the
not...
beauty of the NFL. To me, the Bills and the Chiefs are completely different. I think the Chiefs are on dynasty mode right now. Like, they're about to go crazy. They're just hungry for Super Bowls.
But he's not saying they're not going to make the playoffs.
Bills can't get to the AFC
I'm not saying they're not making the playoffs. I'm saying they're not. I don't think they're making a Super Bowl next year.
Yeah, I don't think that's a hot
I can also
take.
see a strong.
That's a bad year for them because they've hosted the AFC Championship game in like every single year that Mahomes has played.
Yep.
And so, like, I think that, I mean, I'm not speaking for you, but at the same time, it's like an off year for them or not being high on them. It's like, okay, they're not going to win the Super Bowl.
It's bound to happen. They're going to have an off year. It's fine. But the thing that's making me look very happy about them is their young defense. Leo Chenal, the linebacker, he's crazy fast. They drafted him last year. Brian Cook, the safety, they drafted last year. He's good, and they have good safeties. They have Reed and, I don't know, did someone replace Thornhill? Did they sign someone else to replace Thornhill, or is he starting now? I forget if he's starting now.
I forget.
But I feel like they might have someone else to replace him. They have Carl Loftus, who could be a good edge rusher. They have McDuffie, who was a first-round corner who played decent when he came back last year. And then they have Jalen Watson, who's an undrafted corner who had playing time, who did pretty good. And then they have Joshua Williams, who's good.
They have Brian Cook at safety.
They do.
Hey, Luke, make sure that you're getting Christian saying the Chiefs are going to do bad this year.
But him saying no, that's not fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. No, that's not fair.
It is so much different than the Bills.
No,
the Chiefs and the Bills are not even on the same level.
Not.
Nobody's in the same conversation as the Chiefs. Like, there's not
They're
a team
not,
in the
it's
NFL
not
that's in the
even
same
But are we
They're
talking
not.
about this year, or are we talking about the past 5 years?
Andy Reid, way better than Sean McDermott.
I'm not disagreeing, but
I
I don't.
never
He
said
didn't say that they're bad. Him
never
saying
said
that they
they're
can
bad.
lose any time in the playoffs isn't a hot
I said
take.
they're making the playoffs no matter what. They're
But
winning their
concerned,
division.
there's no reason to be concerned.
But his concern
Yes,
is saying
there
them not
is.
winning the Super Bowl, and you're kind of agreeing.
Last year they had a good team. They struggled like every year since they've been in the playoffs. Every year Super Bowl.
Hey, I'm all for it. We're going to get some clicks off of this.
So, so how is he wrong? If they don't win the Super Bowl, he's right, and if they win the Super Bowl, he's wrong?
If they lose in the wild card, sure. But I'm saying the Bills are in trouble in the long term.
And I disagree with. All right,
like McDermott might be fired. Andy Reid,
but we're not doing
we're
not doing the long term
But
outlook
Andy
today.
Reid
If he's
brought up last year about retiring already. You don't know when he's gone.
The Bills are at a crossroads. The Chiefs are not. The Chiefs are going to be contenders year in and year out. The Bills.
All right,
He's not saying-
you're not letting me finish. You just keep interrupting and then saying that.
All right, let's go.
All I said is that I can see them losing any time. They just don't. They have questions everywhere for receivers. They're guys that they keep that keep being brought up that they're doing great are getting hurt. Tony's hurt. I don't know how long he's out. He has surgery, right?
I think he'll be back though.
He should be back, but I don't know when.
He never said he's worried about the Chiefs
Ross.
long term. He said that he's not.
They're gonna be.
They
nuts.
can lose in the playoffs. That's not a hot
Here's my
take.
question. So if Travis Kelce changed his position from tight end to wide receiver, is he not a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL? Because I think the answer is yes, he is a top 5 wide receiver.
Yes, he's a
Hutchinson
receiver.
says
So they have a number 1 wide receiver who has to
But
be
that's one
covered
guy.
by slower middle linebackers or smaller safeties. So it's like he's always going to be a matchup
I'm
nightmare.
not
He's
worried
always
about
gonna have 1,000
safety.
Chiefs
yards
didn't have
receiving.
receivers last year.
They had pretty solid receivers. You could look at. Yeah, pull up the stats for.
Is
Chiefs
Juju
receivers.
Smith-Schuster really that much better than, let's say,
Oh,
Kadarius
he's talking
Toney
crap
or
on
whatever
Juju
receiver?
now.
I love Juju, but let's be realistic about what he is.
Juju's a tight end. Juju attacks the middle of the field and makes great
Juju
catches.
probably
He's
had
a
800
physical
yards
slot guy.
at least, I think.
So their leading receiver was obviously Kelsey. Number 2 was Juju at just under 1,000 yards. Then Valdez Scantling at 687, and then McKinnon was 512. And then after
Where's,
that,
McKinnon was 5.
Where's
Yeah.
shoot? What's his name? What
Ross
Hardman
was
do?
injured.
No,
Who?
I think Ross was hurt. Hardman.
Nicole,
I knew he had injury issues.
25 catches for 300 yards, but
He was out
obviously,
like
like
the
you
whole
said,
year last year.
They worked him out of the offense. He's fast. That's what I mean. The receivers arguably got better from last year.
I'm just saying it's questionable still.
And but, just since we're kind of going back and forth, the Chiefs starting running back, what's his name?
I can't pronounce his last name.
Isaiah
I love him
Pacheco.
though.
Isaac Pacheco.
Is
Isaiah.
Pacheco?
Do you recall what round he was picked in?
7th round. I'm gonna punch you.
The 7. He was a beast last year in the playoffs. He was.
And I'm glad he's
physical,
good.
he
I'm a
was
fan of him. You knew I loved him.
Oh, we also didn't mention Sky Moore. I don't think anybody mentioned Sky
Sky
Moore. He
Sky
played,
Moore did
he
not
played
do
solid at the end of the year last year.
Oh, he did. The only thing
He
he
was
did
a
was in the
gadget
Super
guy.
Bowl. The
He
only
was a
thing he
gadget
did
guy.
was in the Super Bowl.
He didn't have a single touchdown until the Super Bowl. I'm not.
He did nothing. He
Show up in the big
he
games.
was
I
supposed to
guess.
be the return man too, and he was bad at return.
so right now MGM has the Chiefs over under for total wins at 11.5. Would you lean over or under,
Over.
Christian?
I would lean probably. I'd say they could get 12 wins.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah,
But
I mean,
yes,
he's
that's
not.
what I'm saying. I think
right,
the minimum
I-
is 11
But
wins.
And
I think me and Christian don't have the problem. You comparing what he said about the Chiefs to what I said about the Bills, just it's apples. and
Why?
oranges.
They're both Super Bowl
I just
contenders,
think
and you
it's
both said that
questionable.
you're
Plus,
worried about
the
them, but that
Chiefs are
doesn't
on-
mean
The
much.
Chiefs are in their own category.
I just think you guys are almost agreeing more than you're disagreeing.
Well, they built their line up good, but Juwan Taylor, I don't know how he's going to be. Is he playing left tackle for him, or is he playing right tackle?
He's playing right tackle, I believe. but
Who's their
I'm-
left tackle now?
It's
They have Thuney,
Donovan
Tooney, or how do you
Smith.
say it?
Donovan Smith. But I'll take Andrew Wiley was their starting right tackle. Like it's not like the Chiefs didn't get worse, and as long as you have Mahomes, everyone watched the quarterback series. He's him. Like Andy Reid.
I
is
never
him.
disagree.
But they're not in the same conversation as the Bills. It's the Chiefs.
They can have
and then
a
the
down
rest of the
year where
league.
I could be nervous for them. Like if I was a Chiefs fan right now, I would be nervous. Telling you the complete truth. I
Which
could
is
be
just
nervous
them
with
not
us
winning the
losing.
Super Bowl.
But
Like
that-
last
Yeah.
year. Last year I was like, oh, we're definitely going to the
That's
Super
any
Bowl.
fan though. Only 1 out of 32.
Last
teams
year,
wins
if I
the
was Chiefs
Super
fan, I would
Bowl.
know we were going to the Super Bowl. I said that too. They're definitely going to the Super Bowl.
And only 2 out of 16 go to the AFC Championship. I know that's different,
The
but
Bills and the Chiefs are not on the same level. It's Chiefs and then everyone else. Josie, you're a little quiet over there.
I'm just saying, I was looking up because I was curious what Patrick Mahomes' career record is. Do you guys know what it is?
A lot
Good.
to a little.
64-16 is his career record, and his touchdown to interception ratio is 192-49.
I think like his most interceptions
That-
was like the year like
I would argue that touchdown to interception ratio is no, it's not similar to Rodgers. I was going to say Rodgers hasn't even cracked 100 interceptions, has he?
Not barely.
Unless it happened
If
last
he
year.
Has, barely.
I was just
yeah,
saying unless
it's
it happened last year, but
ridiculous.
like I mean those numbers are insane.
I'm calling it right now. Yes, they have the greatest quarterback of all time. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to be the greatest quarterback of all time.
talent-wise,
Going to be.
He's going to be. He
Going
agrees
to
with
be.
me.
I-
Yeah,
Going
going
to
to
be
be.
is
That's what I
different
said.
than saying he is, though.
He could also randomly retire.
And but then after I said that, I say he's going to
No,
be.
no.
that's
you
a
cor- you
conversation
cor-
for another day.
You
too.
corrected yourself, but
See, but that's like if you're looking back to like
I mean,
2009, you could say that Calvin Johnson's going to be the greatest receiver of all time, and then he retired after a 9-year career.
But what I'm saying too, though, is people are already putting in that conversation. If they win the Super Bowl next year too, he's going to be the best receiver. Best quarterback. I think. People are going to start saying that he is, and
talent-wise, he's already there. But I don't know. I truly put the Chiefs on a pedestal where it's like ridiculous. Like they're in every single game, no matter what the score.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
lie to you, but I think their defense is better than their offense this year. That's one thing that is good.
That's a hot take. That wasn't a hot take.
That's the clickbait right there.
No, that's a good hot take, dude.
Why?
Think of all the young guys that started for them.
You kind of battered on their. You
all
kind of battered on their defense though.
No, I didn't. I said their defense is great. That was literally my
If
whole
their
conversation.
defense is great, then now I kind of agree with how I agree with you that they can lose any time. But if you think their defense is better than their offense, they're gonna win the Super Bowl.
Patrick Fricamo.
Luke, what's your take on who's gonna be better, offense or defense for the Chiefs?
Offense all day.
Offense.
I think their defense could be better.
I'm glad.
Then they're gonna win the Super Bowl.
It's all on the same.
Like Mike Florio said, though, literally all their starters are young guys. Like
Okay, but
most of them were rookies last year, and
they
won the Super Bowl.
I know, but you gotta diverge from coaches speak
I'm
versus
so glad that all this is on camera right now.
Well, so here's.
I don't care if it's
here's-
on
listen,
camera.
listen, here's a big question for me. Did last year not prove that Patrick Mahomes does not need a number one wide receiver? So then what's the issue? Because he doesn't need he just won a Super Bowl without a number one wide receiver last year.
If he didn't have
Why does
Kelsey,
he
they
need
would have
one?
lost.
Agree.
But they have Kelsey.
No, I agree. 100%.
But you
I
just
agree
said they
with that.
didn't have a wide receiver one. You just said he was the receiver one.
They have the greatest tight end of all time. He's not a wide receiver, but he's a tight end.
He's a
different
receiver.
position.
He's a
receiving
receiver.
tight
All
end.
right.
He's a
Well, then
receiver.
by
They
that
don't
argument,
use
then
the
he has
ball.
a receiver one, and he's fine.
I don't know, dude. I really do think they're gonna be questionable this year.
I don't know. I don't disagree with that. I think if you're saying their defense is going to be great and better than their offense, then I disagree with you saying that
said
they're
they could be.
gonna have some issues.
I said they could be.
I feel like we should just have an
next
episode.
team?
Could be. It's like Pat McAfee.
We might have to roll back the tape later on. I don't know if you
It's
said
like Pat McAfee getting sued for nothing.
everything could be.
Allegedly.
All right.
See, everything
All right.
could be or
All
allegedly.
right. I'm gonna cut this one off. We're gonna go from one side of the spectrum to the best team in the league, who I do not think there's question marks for the Chiefs, to a team that is on the very poor side of the spectrum in the Texans. Josie, hit it away.
Yeah, sounds good. So, regardless of what you think about how the Texans did in the draft, which, I mean, I know there's mixed reviews on trading away all
was
of your future for a
entertaining.
player. Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe that Will Anderson is going to be very good. I mean, there's nothing to say that he won't really, based on his college report and then also what they gave away to trade up for him. Obviously, they're high on him as well. They're going to utilize him right away. Like, he's going to be a day one starter. I think the biggest thing about the Texans is, regardless of what you think about them, like, it's not a one-year fix. It's not. Like, they're not going to be the team this year. We were talking about this earlier. I'm big on the Shanahan tree and the coaches coming out of there. The coordinators between Mike McDaniels, Robert Saleh, and D'Amico Ryans. I'm high on D'Amico Ryans. I think he's going to be a good coach. But I do not think that this year is going to be the year that they take that big leap. Stroud has looked like all the other rookie quarterbacks, honestly, in the preseason so far, a little iffy. But again, I mean, it's his first NFL play, so it's not something to be necessarily concerned about yet. So honestly, their floor, I mean, a top 3 pick. I mean, maybe the number 1 pick in the draft again. So, I mean...
Which Arizona will eat that up. If they can try and find a way to get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, absolutely. And so who's to say that they don't trade to get some of that draft capital back next year if they do have the first pick? Because they're not going to need to take a quarterback, and a quarterback basically is going to go number 1 every single year.
Well, the Texans won't have that pick, though.
They could give up Tunsil.
They did give... Oh,
Yeah.
you're right.
So-
Good call.
And Tunsil's...
Yeah.
Tunsil's really the only thing that I would offer up as trade value now.
Why would they give up Stingley? He was there.
Petrie, all those younger guys. So
Yeah.
they're really hoping that Will Anderson and CJ Stroud both become
absolutely.
Hall of Honor type players.
Worth what they gave up to get Will Anderson, which, I mean, who's to say it won't? Ceiling, honestly, I mean, 500, maybe that's a little generous, but, I mean, you're looking at 8 and 9. I don't think...
They just got to hope their young guys develop.
That's going to be a heck of a coaching job by D'Amico if they reach
again,
that.
that's a very... I think that's a generous ceiling. Realistically, you're probably looking at more like 5 or 6 wins as a ceiling. The thing I do like about them is I think that the trenches look pretty good. Their offensive line, honestly, they have some good guys on the offensive line between Tunsil and Howard at tackle. Then they have Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Green and Shaq Mason at guard. I'm not too sure about their center, honestly, but I think that
was a reach in the draft.
Yeah,
Penn
and
State
Representing Erie, though.
yeah, absolutely. So, but honestly, I think their offensive line is pretty young and solid. I also think the D line is pretty solid. Obviously, they added Will Anderson. They have Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins. So I think that on both sides of the ball, the trenches are good, and when you have that base to build on, I think that's a great way to start building a team. Again, I mentioned I really like D'Amico Ryans. It's not a one-year fix. I think that the division, honestly, and we'll talk about more of this as we get through the different teams, is like the division goes through Jacksonville. And so they're going to have to play those teams regardless of, how you feel about the Colts or about the Titans. Like, they're still going to have to play Jacksonville every year. And in order to take a leap and eventually become like a playoff team, they're going to have to go through Trevor Lawrence. And so I think that it's tough. Even if not all the teams in the division are good, it's tough because of who they have in the division. So again, optimistic for next year? No, absolutely not. Optimistic for the future? I think that I think that there's some bright spots to look forward to for Texans fans. So.
All right. We have the rest of the AFC South coming to you, but we are going to pause for another break. Welcome back. Next, we're going to go right into the Colts with Christian.
So I think that if AR-15 could play really good, they could maybe make the playoffs. I think that they could at least get 9 wins. It depends to me on how Steichen goes because I like him a lot, and obviously Richardson was my favorite quarterback in the draft, but I'm taking number 1 because he's too much of a project for number 1, I feel like. But I like him a lot. They had a good draft. They got Josh Down, who I think is a steal in the draft, at where he was. And Julius Brents is a good corner, I think. But the one thing that makes me scared is their receivers, what's going on with JT, and their O-line's always good, but they had a kind of an off year last year. Hopefully they could bounce back. And their defense. The only thing that I think that's going for them on their defense is Shaquille Leonard, and then I think they have a Workey still, the other linebacker. Linebackers are only good in their interior D-line. But even them Buckner looked rough last year.
I don't disagree that they have a shot at making the playoffs. I think they have a much better shot of winning the division than they do getting a wild card spot with how good the rest of the divisions are in the AFC. I know that this is the Jaguars' division to lose. I could see the Colts upending them. I don't think that will happen, but I could see it. I could see that happening more than the Colts sneaking in for a wild card spot, just because I think the wild card spot is going to be the 10 or 11 win even for that third wild card.
Their Colts are just a team that need to depend on their young guys developing because Woods, their tight end they drafted, 6'7", like he has so much potential, but he hasn't done anything yet. Alec Pierce, he had some sparks last year. He wasn't bad. I think he was like one of the main targets. Mm-hmm. And then Pittman's good, obviously. Twitty Pay, was he hurt all last year too again, or did he come back? Because he's another young guy who could still bounce back as an edge rusher for them. They drafted in the first round. Ebukam they have, who's at least a solid starter, but I think he's overpaid. Corners, they have Brents, who hopefully develops, and Kenny Moore, who I think is starting to slow down. I think he's been slowing down the past few years. The only safety I'm high on is Nick Cross because he's so young, he could be nuts. He was 20 when he was drafted. I think I like him a lot. I wish Pittsburgh drafted him last year, and I was mad about that, but I don't know. They could be good. Hopefully Steichen can develop AR. That's the main goal. And then one thing I really don't like about them is their owner.
All right, so the Colts seem to be a team on the rise, a team that might be a little bit on the decline, the Titans, but they've dominated the division of recent. Eli, take it away.
Yeah, so again, I'm just going to mention with the schedule, the AFC South this year is matched up with the AFC North, as we mentioned, very strong, and then the NFC West, who, again, could be kind of top-heavy. In the draft, they added Peter Skoronski, obviously expecting a lot out of him this year to bolster their offensive line. They also drafted Will Levis, who obviously won't be starting the year. They have Malik Willis there, obviously, from last year as well. So there'll be an interesting situation to follow. I also really liked Tajay Spears that they drafted from Tulane in the third round to spell Derrick Henry. I'm really interested to see how he plays. They also signed Sean Murphy-Bunting at corner. They recently signed D-Hop at receiver, and then also Chris Hubbard to help out with that offensive line as well. They were one of 3 teams last year with less than 300 yards per game, and that was led by a bottom 3 passing game. So obviously something they need to improve on. Hopefully D-Hop will help with that, and then also their first-round pick last year with Burks to improve, to help their passing game, to catch up with their middle-of-the-pack rushing game. Obviously, Derrick Henry, one of the best backs in the league, but you would have expected more out of their rushing game last year. Their defense was in the bottom half of the league in yards allowed per game, and they gave up the most passing yards per game in the league, but also the lowest rushing yards per game, which I found really interesting. I doubt that if we went back years and years, that probably doesn't happen too often. They did lose Bud Dupree, and they need to get better in the back end, and they honestly didn't do a whole lot to do that, so I'm a little concerned. With their corners, again, I mentioned that they signed Sean Murphy-Bunting, but not a ton to help out there. Most books have them at 7.5 total wins, which I have written down. I would 1,000% stay away from that bet because I see them sitting at right at 7 or 8 wins. But their floor can be, in my opinion, as low as 4 wins. If their revamped offensive line struggles, I believe they only have 1 offensive lineman returning. And if they are unable to stop the passing attacks like last year, they could have issues, but it also depends on the young quarterbacks in their division as well, how they play in those games against them. However, with their weaker division and depending on those young quarterbacks, I could see them getting up to 9 or 10 wins to compete with the division, kind of similar to what Christian was saying with the Colts. But even if that did happen, I believe they'd be an extremely early exit, one and done in the playoffs. But again, most likely, I believe 7 or 8 win season, and I wouldn't be surprised if Malik or Levis got some reps later in the year and took over for Tannehill and kind of bridged the future. I'm really excited to see how they play in the future.
Well, the thing with their corners is Christian Fulton started showing good sparks last year. And then they had this young rookie corner, McCreary, who actually did decent for them. So, I mean, those two could be nuts for them still.
I know it got better, but just I don't think there's going to be a ton of improvement going from the worst in the league in passing defense, where even if there is improvement, I don't think it's going to be enough to be middle of the pack.
Pick this year.
Yeah.
I don't think they do anything.
But what if the quarterbacks in their division suck?
And Vrabel's kind of like Tomlin and Harbaugh in the fact where it's just that they might never be sky high with like teams like the Chiefs or the Bengals, but Vrabel's not gonna let them suck.
I mean, couldn't you see them going? I could see them going 5-1 in their division. And in that case, it's like, all right, there's 5 wins against your division. Your division's struggling if those quarterbacks aren't great, and then you have a chance at winning the division.
Well, last year the Titans, their second half of the regular season, their record was terrible. Mm-hmm. And even with that, they still almost won the division with Josh Dobbs playing quarterback. Jacksonville barely won the division when everything possible went wrong with Tennessee.
9-8, right?
Yeah.
Jacksonville?
So
they won the division.
I mean, everything went wrong for Tennessee, and they were still right in it there.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just one of the weird teams. We'll see what Hopkins can do. I mean, Jacksonville, we've all kind of alluded to it, and I agree, they are the best team in the division. They have the best quarterback. They have a great head coach. Young team all around. There's not really an older player. Mm-hmm. Every guy's in their 20s. Every guy's in their prime. But even with that, Jacksonville, with the inexperience, what if the youthful issues cause just some immaturity? They slip up a couple of games. All of a sudden, a team coached by Vrabel might sneak in and stay relevant. Or a team like the Colts, Richardson balls out. He might come in. I don't think the Texans are necessarily with those other 3 teams, but it's just interesting.
You don't think Peterson could make Jacksonville young guys smart?
No,
I think they can. And they're the favorite to win the division. We're not arguing that, but I would not be surprised if the Titans went 5-1 in the division and won the division.
Tennessee's kind of just like Pittsburgh in a sense where you can never just really count them out. They're too well coached to just be terrible and completely bottom out. So, and kind of just going off of the Jaguars, Travis Etienne, I'm huge on him. Yeah. I think he's crazy talented.
Huge on T-Law now?
T-Law, so kind of like Eli and Herbert, I've never been a big T-Law guy. I am a believer in him now, but also he needs to fix up some things because we were talking
Well, he beat Herbert in the playoffs, so obviously he's a better quarterback.
Yeah, but
I'm
if
just
you
playing.
look at in totality, Herbert, neither one of them had a good game. They each played
Right.
atrocious halves. They just took turns on which half they played atrocious. T-Law still has a lot of room to grow, but also he does have the potential to be in that top 5 scenario. I mean, look at the jump that Jalen Hurts made from year 2 to 3, and I'm taking T-Law over Hurts. So it's not I wouldn't be that weird for T-Law. What?
T-Law over Hurts? I don't know right now.
People are hating on
I don't
Hurts,
know,
dude.
dude.
Like, people said, who was that one guy who was talking about, I forget. Oh, James Jones talking about Fields. Shut up, dude. Fields is not better than Hurts.
NFC is next week. Who has the Eagles? Josie has the Bears. I think Christian has the Eagles.
Yeah.
So
I hate people hating on him.
we'll definitely talk about that more when we get to the NFC. Jacksonville's the most talented team, but also I just think you can't sleep on Tennessee.
Yeah. No, I think the only question mark about Jacksonville really is like who's going to be that dominant wide receiver, because I think they have guys who have a lot of talent, but it's like, okay, what's Calvin Ridley going to be? You know, but he hasn't played football in like what 2.5 years, something like that,
Yeah,
something
he looks
ridiculous.
nuts right now.
Christian Kirk is
I just want to know if he's
solid.
gambling the over or under. That's all.
I think Christian Kirk's their guy.
Christian Kirk is good.
He made himself the guy last year.
And like Christian Kirk is very good, but I think he thrives most in the slot. I don't think that's ever really been a question. That's all he did in
Zay Jones
in
is good on the
Arizona.
outside for them last
Zay
year.
Jones
Zay
as a
Jones
wide
is-
receiver 3 is amazing, especially
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
have Evan Ingram plus
Yeah.
the 2 running backs.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's a question of the talent of the wide receivers. It's like who's going to step up to be the guy that Trevor Lawrence goes to on third down. On a third down that you have to convert at the end of the game, who's going to be that guy that steps up
I think
for Trevor
Kirk's
Lawrence?
already that guy for them. I think Kirk was always that guy for them last year.
I think Kirk is a very high level B.
Like, if
player.
Kirk has the same year he did
High
last
end
year, he's
too.
top 10 already.
I think the biggest question, but I think what changed a lot of people's perspective of Christian Kirk is how much money they paid him for him to be.
And he proved he deserved that money, too.
For la-
I don't
Yeah.
think in
For
I don't
last
think
year.
I don't think Arizona he really was used right, because they had D-Hop, they had
They don't use Rondell
they
Moore
still
right
had
away.
yeah, then they
Fitzgerald
just
at the
kept
time.
drafting young
Yeah,
guys
they
and
just
trying
kept
to fit them
drafting.
in.
Like, they never used him right. I think he has some injury issues too, but I mean,
Because I think that's the next step for Jacksonville is they're a good team, they can win games, but when it comes down to it, who's going to step up? You know, Trevor Lawrence has shown that he can be a very solid quarterback, but who's going to be the guy who's making that catch at the end of the throw? And if they can establish somebody who can do that, then they're going to be a team who can play with basically anybody.
they almost did last year. They almost beat
Yeah.
the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that scares me is their O-line. Because
Yeah,
Robinson
question mark.
got suspended the second year in a row.
Jeez.
Lost Juwan Taylor, and then don't know about Harrison.
Yeah, I don't know. Titans and Jags play in the last week, so I think that could be a very important game, possibly even for the division. But again, it all
They
depends on how the
played the
Titans.
last
is.
game of the year like last year, too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They do it. I mean, they do it on purpose.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. So we did go a little bit late. We are gonna wrap it right there. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll be doing the same exact thing, just with the NFC conference. Thank you.